This is how you install an interior door. And bonus, it doesn't fit, so I'm going to show you how to modify it. The number one job people hire handymen for is for replacing or repairing doors. So save your money. I'm going to show you how to do it yourself. In a best case scenario, your flooring is the same height inside and outside the room. And the header of the door is a little bit higher than the one you buy off the shelf. This is, however, an older house in a basement. So I've got a poured floor leveler, raised tile floor coming down onto concrete. And I've got a drop ceiling in here covering all my HVAC. So I have to modify the height of the jamb, which is the side, and the height of the door so it can swing freely. So requirement number one, we need to have it level or plumb, okay? We want to have it square, and we don't want to have the door twisted inside the frame. The header is level, my ceiling is level, and my door jamb isn't bad. But the one challenge I've got to face is the thickness of this jamb is exactly 4 5/8, and the thickness of the wall, drywall to drywall, is 4 3/4, or 4 5/8. We'll call it that way. I'm just going to squeeze it. This top of the jamb here is going to have to make contact with the drywall underneath this edge right here. That'll allow us to have a perfect finish on the inside. So what I need to do is I need to modify my ceiling here. I'll just take a straight edge up against the walls, trace that out. Now this door should fit the space. Perfect. The only problem now is the tile is in the way. So instead of cutting the flooring, we're going to cut the jamb. I need my jamb to be cut 1 1/4, okay? 1 1/4 this way, and we'll measure from the height of that wood down to the floor exactly 79 1/8. Now I'm going to carry the door over to the sawhorses, everybody. You gotta love working in a short ceiling basement. Wow, that's close. That's funny, Matt, you're right. We can't put more than 2 coats of paint on that ceiling. So now the door is dry fit into the space and we know it's gonna work. And the jamb's sitting on the tile. We wanna check out to see if it's crooked one side to the next by looking at the gap across the door. If it's perfect, that means you put your floor in level. You could add a shim underneath your jamb to raise or lower one of the sides as needed. Once you have your gap perfectly consistent, then it's time to remove the door and install the jamb hinge side first. Just take any Robertson drill bit, set it in the hole, give it a little nudge there to release the pin, and then you take the claw of the hammer, lift the pins out, and then be ready to grab the door. All right, let's get this out of our way for now. And here's a tip. Always put the hinges back where they belong so you don't lose them. That's an expensive trip to the store. So the secret to installing a door is you have a rectangle getting installed inside, hopefully, another rectangle. But nobody frames square. So you're gonna have a space that hopefully is framed a little bit wider than what you want, and it might look more like a trapezoid. It might be tight in the bottom, wide in the top. Your job is to put a door perfectly square and plumb inside this crazy shape. All right, so in order to do that, we have to find out what is the smallest, most difficult dimension that we're working with. First thing we do is we take our level on the hinge side of the door, and we check to see if it's level. Now, for a lot of people, you might think that's level, but watch this. Now I'm gonna make it perfect. And look at the gap that shows up when it's perfect. All right? That means we've got to use shims, okay? So now what we're gonna do is take our frame and we're gonna install it back in the space, and we're going to take the hinge side and attach it at the very bottom. And then we're going to set it with a couple of brad nails. These are 18 gauge. And once we get everything set in place on the jamb side, then we're going to use screws. But first we want to make it perfect. The secret to shims is they're thin on one end and thick on the other. So if you put them in reverse, you have the same thickness on both ends, which keeps everything square. If your frame is twisted, then you can put the thick ends together to create a wedge so that you can create a nailing surface for the jamb that's square. Here we go. Let's do the top first. Come from each side, put some pressure on it. Yeah, I'm liking that. Now we'll do the middle. If the space is too small for two shims, okay, what you want to do is leave the skinny side behind the hinge, because it's okay if the jamb opens just a little bit. All right, that'll help make sure there's lots of room on the door. So come from the back side. Now I'm using a 2-inch nail because I'm penetrating this material plus a gap, and then I want to have at least an inch of nail in the wood. Next step, remove the doorstop. Okay. So now we're going to put a screw in front of every hinge where it's going to be hidden behind the doorstop later. But because these things are made out of MDF, which is medium density fiber, it's not solid wood, we have to do what we call a dimpler bit or a pre-drill or a countersink right where the shim is, right behind where the doorstop is going to go. Now we're going to use a 3.5-inch screw, drive it all home. And the head will sit perfectly flush. We're going to check the level here, make sure A, it's level, B, there's no gaps. If there's any gaps, like just down here, we could throw another little shim in just to close up that little tiny gap. Now it's perfect. The other thing we want to do, and this is a luxury, you generally have to follow your walls here, but it's nice if that's level as well. It's actually leaning out just a little bit this way, which is fine because that's the way the door is going to close anyway. Less important, okay? Now we've got this side done. We're going to remove the pins and stick the door back in and use the door as our template to be able to position and locate the rest of this material, because this has options to fit. The door, you don't want to modify it if you don't have to. Now our focus is going to be all over here. So first, we use a straight edge and we'll see how well is the door across the surface. All right, it would be nice if we can get this jamb to push this way just a touch. The further you go down, the more important that is. Look at that gap. Okay, when we're done, we're going to put casing here. The last thing you want is a huge gap here that you have to fill full of caulking. So let's see how much wiggle room we have. Pull it forward. There. Sometimes when you measure perfect, you find other things that get in your way. So we'll start with the jamb as close to the frame as we can. See what we got here for an option. Okay, in order to finish, you want to do this kind of clockwise. That hinge is perfect, this hinge is perfect, this hinge is perfect. Our gap across the top is perfect, so we don't need to adjust the height. Now we want to work this corner right here. That gap, which is a little bit tight, is we can force the header over to the right because our gap here is really good. All right. And that forces that over. Okay, I like it. This is just a matter of, we're going to start nailing at the top and work our way to the bottom, trying to keep things as flat across the surface as we can. And if there's anything in the way, we want to cut it out of our way. That's not terrible, I'm just saying. Now we're going to throw a nail in here. Okay. And because I want to make sure I have a shim on the other side, just so that it doesn't twist that jamb. This is tedious, but The more times we check this out, the better we are. I've got a bit of a bigger gap here than I want. Remember that doorstop is also your privacy. You don't want that opening up, but people can see all the way in, all right? So let's start with 2 shims, skinny side to skinny side. We'll break it up to a few different locations. Okay, all right. And that is just a little bit too tight. So I'm gonna go with 1 shim, throw in a single brad nail, and we're just gonna check our depth all the way down. Always shim from the outside so that if this does close twisted, it's twisted where the door is coming in, okay? That ensures maximum amount of privacy. Here we go. Now I can just pull this until the gap gets the right size. That to me is perfect. Now you'll see I'm going from a nice gap. This isn't open quite enough. That's all right. It's just a brad nail. Now I'm loving it, okay? Now we have to do the bottom. This is a little bit bigger of a gap, so we'll take one from each side. Again, that's perfect. One more in the middle here so that it doesn't flexing and bowing. Yep, it's gonna be 2. Here we go. And we're gonna just hold 1 and make an adjustment here. Push that just a little bit until it's perfect. Now that's the money right there. Now the same thing. Now we want to take this off so that we can pre-drill and then set our screws. All right, one more tool to help you out with your arsenal, and that's this. Once you've screwed the hinge side jamb on, you want to take one of these. This is a framing square. On against the jamb and slide it up. Make sure you've got a perfect contact. This has to be perfectly square. If this is perfectly plumb, this needs to be perfectly square so that your door will have a perfect gap, okay? It's really quite simple. If it's not, you need to raise or lower the other side of this jamb until that is achieved. Next thing you do is grab your oscillating tool, all right? We're going to cut back all of these trims nice and flush. Just making a mess all day with this, right? And we'll do the same outside. Next step, we're gonna put the doorstop back on. Now, very important here. You see these shims? That's where the screws are. Okay, so don't want to put a brad nail into a screw. We'll start up at the top. All right, we're gonna close the door until it closes against the top. The secret here is to not put this wood under too much pressure because you don't want to lock it out of position. So you want to leave it a hair loose. Every 16 inches or so, I'm using 1.5-inch brad nails because I'm attaching this to this wood, but not trying to grab so much of the frame that I'm causing it to pull in and warp. Not just the right tool for the job, but the right fastener. Next step, guys. So we're going to paint the door. Remember, the doors that you buy at the store, they come with a primer on them. It's not a finish paint. We have 2 choices. We can go brush and roller, which works. And if you have a finished space and you're just changing the door in a finished space, I might suggest doing that and you can paint it in place. Or if you're working on a renovation like I am, you can set it up on the door and you can spray the door finish. Just remember, the door has 6 sides, front and back, and then all 4 perimeter edges. And get at least 1 coat on every edge for best results. Definitely 2 anywhere where you can see it. And because it's a basement, you want to paint the top and the bottom as well. And instead of watching the paint dry, let's install the door casing while we're waiting. And when casing a door, just stand the casing on the ground. It always comes long enough that it'll go more than you need. So right here, there's a joint between the header and the side. It's notched out. You want your casing to come up to that joint. All right? And then when you're finished, you're gonna add a bead of caulking in the middle to join it all together. So that's where we set it up. And then that same distance here, you wanna copy here. So about this high. So you put your pencil in there and you just pull it straight out. That's where you cut on a 45-degree angle. Measure that off. For the header, I'm gonna throw a miter on this side, and then I'll come back over here and I'll put the miter perfect after we get the two sides installed. All right, let's go get all of these cut. Sexy as you wanna be. Now, the secret here is we're gonna go on the thin side of the bevel into the door jamb. So we're using one. I know this gets a little complicated, but on the thin side of the bevel going into the jamb, we're using 1.5" nail. And when we're going through the thick side, trying to get all the way to the framing, we're gonna use the 2". Okay? When you make a perfect cut, it should have a little bit of a gap. Push it tight to the ceiling and reduce the amount of caulking you need to use later. Don't put the casing tight up against the hinge. Always open up a little bit of gap and then tight to the ceiling. If you push it right against the hinge, it'll squeak every time you open the door. Switch over to the 1.5" nails, tight to the jamb. Try to avoid putting nails too close to the hinges because you're going to come back with a putty or a caulking and maybe do some light sanding. Stay away from these things as long as you can. Less is more. All right, there's 2 ways to do this. You can set this up and you can measure the outside, okay? Cut it square and then add the angle. That's the way I like to do it, nice and simple. Remember, I've only got 1 brad nail on each side at the top. These trims can still be forced to move in and out. We'll make it perfect. Okay, that actually looks pretty damn good up there, doesn't it? Now remember guys, we're gonna be adding caulking on both joints, all over the whole door. That holds it all together. The nails are just to keep it in place until the caulking dries. So the less you nail, the less you have to patch. Let's switch over to the 2" nails. Just make sure it's not gonna kick loose during regular wear and tear. All right, it's caulking time. Less is more when you're cutting your caulking gun. Remember, acrylics don't need a seal puncture, so you can start nice and tight. We're just gonna fill up these gaps. There we go. Little bead, little bit of pressure. And a quick finger wipe. And we don't need to be all worried about this because we are going to be painting when we're done. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna recommend use the crown molding from DAP, okay? This is specially formulated for extra expansion and contraction. You won't get gaps and cracks over time. Always caulk the trim to the wall. I almost forgot. Time for the second coat in the paint. Oh, and for the love of God, remove all your hinges before you do all your caulking and painting. Nothing worse than painted hinges, caulking that stops above and below the hinges. Those little details matter. This is what a pro does. All right, this is the doorstop. The outside, you want to caulk. The inside, you don't. It has to be perfectly square. If you caulk here, you risk the caulking getting in the way of the door closing, and that puts pressure on the hinges. So ignore that, just paint it in. But here, you run your bead all the way down. Then you take the extra, fill your nail holes. Anytime you have 2 different materials joined together, you need caulking because there's going to be expansion and contraction. We want to supply something for the paint to bond to. So this is the same material, MDF to MDF, but this gap here, there's room for this to expand and contract. And if you see a shadow, you want to fill it because shadows are ugly. Now there's something that you can paint. That's what a professional finish looks like. So when you have a brad nail that doesn't get completely sunk, grab yourself a little Robertson bit and a hammer and drive those nails deep into the material. And then we're going to fill those up with the dry Dex material instead of the caulking. This makes a bigger hole, and big holes need to be filled with something that doesn't shrink as much. Caulking will shrink as it dries. But when you're filling a bigger hole, you want something that doesn't shrink. Use dry Dex, give it a quick sand before you paint, and you're good to go. We're gonna do the door jamb. The door's got 2 coats, but now we gotta do the door jamb. Now, I'm gonna recommend you get a 3-inch angle brush. Special note right here. See where it says stiff? A stiff brush is for doing trim work, okay? The medium brush or the soft brush is for walls and other stuff, okay? Stiff brush is for doing trim work. Less is more. So grab yourself a handy pail like this, push the paint into the brush, take all the excess off the outside, okay? We're gonna start at the top. And before you paint, make sure you grab a sanding sponge and rub everything down because that's gonna be necessary. Less is more. It's gonna look a little streaky the first coat, okay? Don't worry about it. The stiff brush is designed to give us a really nice finish. Trust me, it's gonna look funny while you're applying it, but it will dry smooth. That's just the way it works, all right? And the same rule with painting trim as it's painting walls. You're gonna wanna sand in between coats. Okay, renovating is a dirty space. There's gonna be dust everywhere. You can't make it perfectly clean the first time. So after the paint dries, grab your sanding sponge and just go lightly over the entire surface again. Okay, now I'm gonna overpaint the trim onto the ceiling here because when I'm finished, the whole bathroom has got a couple more touch-ups. We're gonna paint the ceiling later. Try not to leave paint pooling up around the hinges or you'll have to cut it out later. All right, there we go. One of the rules of painting is you always finish the walls last so that you don't have to be doing precision work here. Get your brush in, make sure it just gets wet, okay? You're not leaving streaks and ridges on the wall. All right, start down here, heel, push the bristles towards the end, avoid touching the floor. Now, of course, everything we're doing here is going to be 2 coats. That's why less is more. If you put too much paint on, or if you use a cheap quality paint, all right, it'll go on so thick, that just looks nasty. Okay. Now, in most conditions, generally speaking, by the time you finish painting the first coat, things are dry enough to do the second coat. But here in the basement, the temperature at the floor is a lot colder than it is where your head is or where your heart is. So be patient. Give this thing about an hour or throw a fan on it if you're in a hurry. Finally, the door is dry. The door jamb is dry. And it's time for us to put it all back together. Just so you all are aware, when you take the screws out of a door, they don't go back in. They are incredibly screwed up. So here's my trick. If you got toothpicks, great. If you don't, just take a knife and cut these things up. You'll be slow and intentional or the blade will just follow the grain. Okay. For everybody out there who's got screws that keep popping out of your hinge, that's how you fix it. Use a toothpick or use a shim, fill that hole, and that'll create your compression. Now we got to do the same thing with the hinges that are on the jamb side. And we got to use the same secret to make sure that they get a good grab too. So we're going to set the bottom hinge first. There we are. little bit of a wiggle. Okay. Okay, all we need is a doorknob. You see, the mortise here is done with a router, but the hardware they sell is square. We got to square that off in order to install it. That ought to work. In the old days, the knobs are a lot closer to the edge. So in the new days, this hardware can be adjusted from small to big. Pull these pins down and it extends it. Make it short, make it long. Comes in the package short almost every time. So now we made it longer. I think they're about ready to stop doing that and just make it one size fits all. And then sell a more expensive doorknob for people who are renovating 100-year-old homes. There we go. That fits right in here. Always use your fingers to start. Go backwards until you feel it click in, so you know you're not cross-threaded. Right there. Once you've got it in there a few turns, you know you're not cross-threaded, then you can use the drill. Nice and slow, or you'll scratch the paint inside the screw head. Make sure the edge of the drill and the bit don't touch the handle. It'll take the matte finish off that metal. This one you want to drill on reverse for a little bit. Okay, because you want to make it nice and hot till it starts to smoke. Then when you drive the screw in, you're not going to split the wood. Here we go. When you're making a new hole, always go to the center of the hole. Give it a love tap. Backwards. And then forwards. Now, if you don't mind, I've been waiting a long time to use this bathroom.